Hey, Webmaster here. In this video, I'm going to take you through the step-by-step tutorials to create this incredible calculator. As you can see, this calculator works very well. It does every basic calculation. We can multiply, we can add. Times 1 should give us the same thing. And 8 plus 30 should give us, I guess, 128. Yes. So this calculator works very well. We can delete the last character of what is inside there, and we can also clear everything by the AC key. So this calculator is just like a normal calculator. We can also find percentages. Let's say 20%, and that should give us 0.2. So there you have it. And if I click on any of these keys, you see that it scales with transition. So you can see it gets larger than usual. And we clear this. What if I try to enter any expression that's mathematically incorrect, like 89 times nothing? Press equals to, and it says invalid. So this calculator is working very well, and we are going to build this calculator using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in few minutes. So without further ado, grab your tools and let's get started. So here on my desktop, I have this folder called calculator, and so I open this calculator folder with my VS Code, and inside here I create this basic index.html, style.css, and script.js. If you are wondering how this thing is created, you can just hit this new file tab over icon over here to create all these things. You can name it whatever you want to, but be sure that it has the various extensions .html, css, and js. Inside the HTML, we want to create the basic HTML boilerplate. So type exclamation and hit tab. So this generates the basic HTML boilerplate. We want to change the document, the title from document to what we are building. So we'll create calculator over there, type calculator. If you want to leave it the same way too, it doesn't matter, but we just want it to be descriptive of what we're doing. So under that, inside the head tag still, we want to link the HTML to the CSS that we've created, the style of CSS. So type in link and hit tab. So in the href, type the name of the CSS file that we're trying to link, which is style.css in my case. And before the closing body tag, we also want to link the JS file we've created to the HTML. So before the closing body tag, we want to type in script and hit tab. Inside this script tab, we can put any valid JavaScript here and it will work very well, just like any other thing. But the problem is when our code gets bigger, it becomes very nasty and very difficult managing. So the good thing would be to link an external file. So let's link this to the JavaScript file we've created, which is script.js. So type src and hit tab, and inside this type the name of the JS file we've created. Now here in the body tag, we want to create a div with a class container. So create this, and let's go to the CSS, and in the CSS we want to select the entire document, and we do that by the asterisk sign. Let's give it some properties and value to help us style our things very easily. Now let's style the container we've created. Since it's a class, we select it by the dot notation, so be sure to do that. Let's give it width, linear gradient. So I have this color code pick, so you can use the same thing with comma Paste again. So if we run this code with the live server extension I have, we have a blank web page like this one. So our code is working. Now inside the container, we want to create another div again. So with dot, we want to call it mini container. And inside of that one, we create another div with a class calculator container. And inside this calculator container, this is the box of the calculator. So we want to have two sections. The side where things will be displayed and the keyboard. So let's call the top side where things are display. So let's create another div with the class display. And under that, we'll have the class keyboard. So let's put something inside here. So we'll call this one will be display. Right, so let's go to the CSS and give the CSS properties. We want everything to be centered on the web page. So with that, inside the container class, we'll give it a display. So with the mini container, we give it a padding. And when we run this code, you see our display and keyboard centered on the page, and that's what we want. Now let's give the mini container a background color of black, since we want everything to look black. Now let's start the calculator container. We'll give it a height. Now let's run this and see how it looks like. So this is what we have so far. Now we can be sure that our code is working. The display and this thing keyboard are missing because are not appearing because now we have given a color of black, so it has overshadowed that one. Let's give it a border of 1 pixels, solid, black. Now we want everything to be aligned. We want the display and the keyboard should be on top of each other, so we'll give it a flex direction of column. Now we can deal with the display and the keyboard, but let's start with the keyboard first. If you see the main calculator we are building, you will see that there are 4 keys on each row and we have 5 columns. So we also have to fix these things the way they are on the keyboard. You see the last one has only 3 keys. So in the HTML, inside the keyboard, we want to delete that thing over there and now put the keys inside. So we'll start with creating a button. Each of the key is a button, so we'll create a button with a class btn. So we can copy this one. So let's just deal with the first 4. You see the first row, we have the ACDEL, percentage and /. So let's put that thing in. So this is what we have. So what we want to do now is to paste this button a couple of times and fill it with the various keys in it. So I'll pause and do that and get back to you. Yeah, so this is what I have. I decided to group it 444, but it's not necessary. You can choose to do it this way or not. So let's run this and see what we get. Yeah, so we have this now. So we have to go on and style the keyboard. Here in the CSS, we select the keyboard class and give it a display of grid template column. Columns should be repeat. We want it to repeat 4 times. Take a maximum width of 1 FR. Margin of 10 pixels. Margin bottom 20 pixels. So when we run this, we have this. So now our buttons, our keys are aligned for the way we want it. You could see this one is 3, the last one is 3. So our calculator is working the way we want it to. So now let's style the actual keys, which are the buttons inside the keyboard. So with that, let's select the keyboard class and select the buttons. Let's give it a height of 40 pixels, width of 40 pixels. By this, we can apply half the height or the width as border radius. It can be 50%, you can stay 50% or 20 pixels. So we'll use 50% right here. So border radius should be 50%. And when we save this, we have this. So now our calculator is working the way we want it. Now let's change the background color of the buttons. I've selected some RGB color over here. You can use the same thing. It looks quite similar. When we run this, when we save this, we should have the background showing this way. So now let's change the background color to an RGBA color that I've selected, which is this. You can also use it. It looks quite similar. Let's give it a margin 7 pixels. Font size 1.2 rem. Color white. Border none. Outline none. So when we save this, should have this looking keyboard. So now this thing is working the way we intended to. Now when you look at the actual calculator, you see that the first 3 keys on top here have a slightly different color from these ones, and the last key of all also have different color, which is pretty obvious. So we are also going to implement that. So the first 3 keys are the first top ones, and these ones, the orange ones, are the last of all after all 4. Maybe this is where the grouping that I did comes in handy. Now in the HTML, the first 3 give them a unique ID. So let's call it BTN1. Just leave a space here and add the next class. So we'll do the same thing for the next 2, and the last ones will just add a different class for each of the last items in each list. Let's give it a class of btn2. So let's go. Now in the CSS, we can style those buttons. Let's start with the first one. Remember, we gave them a class of btn1. So let's select it. Let's select keyboard class dot. Since it's a class btn1, let's give them a background color of this color code, this RGBA color code. And now let's style the second one, which is btn2. So keyboard dot btn2, background color should be orange. So now if we save this, you can see the color changes now. So that's exactly what we want. But if you see the last row on the calculator, on the prototype calculator we are trying to build, you see that it has 3 keys, but they perfectly align with the rest, meaning the zero key has extended to take the remaining space, making these ones aligned with it. But as you can see, ours is not, so we have to work on this to make it take the same shape that we've seen in the prototype calculator. So here we come to the HTML and we can see the 0. Let's give it a unique class of 0. So just make a space and type 0. Now let's go to the CSS. Here let's select the class, the 0 class we've just created. So the keyboard dot 0. So you see here we want the 0 to span and take this side so that this one will be pushed here. So we use the grid area property. So we set grid area. We want it to start from the first column and span to this place. So we define the grid area as 5. That's column 5, row 1, span 2, span 2. And when we save this, you can see that the last 2 elements have pushed to align with the other ones correctly, leaving a space here. So now we can extend the width of the 0 to cover this one. So with that, what we do is we increase the width. And when we save that, you see we have this here now. But look, this thing, our 0 is not shaped the way we want it to. That's because we have applied 50% on as the border radius on the buttons and not an absolute value. So we want to change the border radius of the 0 to 20 pixels. And when we save that, we should have something like this. So our 0 is perfectly shaped. So now let's start styling the display. When we save this, we have this. Now you can see the display over here now that we've changed the color to white. If you see the prototype calculator we're building, you'll see that beneath the keyboard we have some thin line here just at the middle. So let's try to implement that. So here in the HTML, after the closing div of the keyboard, we'll put a button with a class footer. So let's go to the CSS and let's style this footer. Let's select the class. Outline. None. When we save this, you see we have this here. So now what we want to do is to implement the click effect, the focus effect, so that when we press anything, it actually expands. So with that, let's go to the CSS. So now in the CSS, we have this class keyboard and button. So inside of this, we give transition. We want it to start, we want it to take 0.5 seconds to expand. So transition. So we want to implement the focus effect so that when we focus, we click any button, it expands. So now let's select the class, and what we want to do is when we focus, let's do something. So we want it to scale. So let's set the transition property to scale 1.1. We want it to expand 110%. But before we move to the JavaScript, let's head into the HTML and remove this display that we wrote here. So now let's move to the JavaScript. So inside the JavaScript, we want to do two main things. We want to get the display and also get the keys in the keyboard. So that's exactly what we want to do for now. So let's let the display. We only want the first one since it's only one, index of 0. So we also want the keys, but the keys are inside of the container, the mini container. So let's get the mini container first. So now we can look for the buttons inside of the mini container. So we'll let so what this get element by class name does is that it returns an array of the elements that we have we get by class name. In this case, button, it brings an array of buttons. So we want to loop through the array and set event on the actual button that is clicked at any point in time. We can use for each, but for the purpose of this video, we are going to use for loop to loop through and set event on any item that gets clicked. So use for let I. So right here, we let the clicked button, we call it clicked item, be equal to the btn at index of I. So that is the item that has been clicked. So when the item is clicked, we want to add an event listener. So dot add event listener. What type of event do we want to be fired? We want a click event. Here, what function do we want to be called whenever the item is clicked? We can use an arrow function, but for the sake of this video, we're going to use a traditional function. So let's call it display function event. Let's create that display function. Function display fn, and it takes in a parameter of event, but let's call it e. So what we are going to do now over here is that we'll match the inner text of these buttons against certain if clauses. So we'll define an if statement. In fact, we can use switch statement over here, which is more professional, but let's stick with the if statement. So let's define an if statement. If, so e dot target equals. Let's check for the AC. We want to take the display, which is this one that we've tagged over here. So take the display and set it to an empty string, so that when we press it, anything inside the display element will be deleted. So here the else statement will serve as the display, the default clause. So else, what we want to do is to take the display text, should be equal to the inner text of the element that is clicked. So should be equal to e dot target dot inner text. And if we save this and head to the calculator and press, nothing is working. Alright, because here I put a dot which shouldn't be. So clear this and save and head to the calculator, and we press anything, you see that it displays over there. But look, only one thing displays. When I press 9 and I press 8, the 9 disappears and the 8 appears, and we don't want that. We want to be able to click multiple elements to appear at the same time in the display. And that's because over here we just set the display.innerText equals to event.target.innerText. We should have appended the element that is clicked to the existing element in the display. So we should have make it plus equal. So plus equals, and if we save this and head over to the calculator, you see everything works. Now we can type multiple numbers and it goes inside. So we can all clear everything, can type. But when I press delete, it also adds delete here. So we should define what we want delete, what to happen when we press this delete. So with that, we come here and add an else if statement. So here we're going to take display dot inner text should be equal to display dot inner text dot, we want to slice the last one, so we'll take a beginning index of 0 and an ending index of -1. So that removes the last character in it. So let's save and head to the calculator to see if it works. So if we have multiple these things over here, we press delete, it takes off the last one. It takes off the last one, and when we all cleared everything moves. So that's with the delete and the AC. So now let's deal with the most important part, which is the equal to. So when we press equal to, what do we want to happen? So with that, we put an else if. We want display eval this display dot inner text. This eval is a JavaScript input function. So it takes the display element, whatever is in the display, and evaluates it whenever we press equals to. So let's test this to see if it works. So here, 8 times 2 should give us 16. So this works. So as at now, our code is working. Our calculator is working. But what if I type in an invalid statement like 48 times nothing and I press equal to? Nothing happens. So we want a way to be able to communicate to the user that what you have entered is invalid. And with that, instead of just implementing this when the inner text is equal to is the same as an equal sign, we'll put this in a try catch block. So let's define the try catch before we explain what goes on. So what we'll do in the try block is that we'll try to evaluate this. So let's copy this one and paste it in the try block. And if it doesn't work, we want to tell the user that no, this is not valid. So we'll then let the display in the catch block, we'll let display what we want to tell the user. So in this case, we want to tell them that your distance is invalid. We want to let them know that this is invalid. So if we save this and go back to the calculator, we'll see that when we type something that's invalid, it tells us that it's invalid. So now our calculator is working up to this point. But look, this works very well, but if we want to find, let's say 88%, it also gives us an error. So we want to be able, because the eval function doesn't consider percentages. So what we want to do is to define this manually, and by that, let's go to the code. And what we want to do is that let me explain what we want to do. What we want to do is that we'll see whatever is typed into the calculator, like this 88, we'll see all these things. If it contains a percentage sign, say this, then we'll have to remove this percentage sign, and whatever is left, we divide it by 100. Then that gives us a percentage of whatever is typed into it. So with this, inside the try block, we'll define an if statement. So we'll say if, what condition do we want to check? We want to check if the element, what is in the display element contains percentage sign. If this means if a percentage is inside of what is in the display element, then we want to do something. Divide it by 100. So what this does essentially is that It removes the last element, which is definitely going to be the percentage sign. Then whatever is left, it divides it by 100. So this side removes the percentage and divide what's remaining with 100. So what if it does not contain the percentage sign? That's the else we should have, which is the else side. Then we should execute this code, the equal to. We should evaluate whatever is inside this thing. So let's copy this code, then delete it from here and put it in the else block of this one. So if we have all this and we save and go back to our calculator, everything should work. So 89 times 3 should work. Everything works now. You can delete or clear everything. Now 90% should give us 0.9. So our calculator is working. But if you look at the prototype calculator, you will see some wide thin line at the edge, which makes it very beautiful, but we don't have it. This is because in the CSS we made some mistakes, so let's correct that. In the CSS over here, when we come to the calculator container class, you will see we give it a border of 1 pixel solid black. Instead of black, let's make it white. So if we save this, you see now we have this white thin border around the distance, and it looks very nice. And this calculator works very fine. We can perform any basic calculation, and it does. Divided by 6 should give us this. We can delete the last element or clear everything at once. We can multiply this by 10, should give us 780. That's it. We can clear everything. Now 80% should give us 0.8. So this calculator works as intended. What I'll be doing in a future video is that I'll use vanilla JavaScript to create the functionalities for all these mathematical arithmetic operations into this calculator, instead of using the inbuilt eval function, since you wouldn't want to use the eval function for a real world application because of security reasons. Yeah, fellow webmasters, this is how we've created this calculator using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to become a fellow webmasters if you haven't already. But hey, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.